Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 539, and today's date is December 11th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Rights of the People Are Violated While the Police State Rises. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Italy, we realize that things are completely falling apart in Italy and many of the European countries. Right now, Italian industrial output was a lot weaker than they expected in October. It's slipping by 0.1% from the month before and offering absolutely no sign of a recovery for Italy's recession-bound economy. We're seeing this occur in many countries in the Eurozone, and we're realizing that they are no longer in a recession. They are heading towards a deep depression, and a lot of the countries in the Eurozone are already there. I mean, of course, the corporate media, the governments, the central banks are not going to admit to this, but they have unemployment that is reaching between 20 and 30%, youth employment reaching between 40 and 60%. They are in a depression. There's no doubt about it. In Canada, they are now warning about a housing bubble. The Bank of Canada warned Wednesday that the country's housing market could be overvalued by as much as 30%. It was the first time the central bank has put a number on housing market overvaluation. And we can see once everything starts to fall apart and housing starts to crumble down, it is going to spread to every single country, and every single country is going to feel the effect, just like in 2008, where almost every single place that was tied into the central banks, they felt the same type of thing, and a lot of countries felt it a lot worse. Now, here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, we are seeing more layoffs. GM is laying off 450 people. Novartis Pharmaceuticals 200, Boeing 360, Qualcomm 600. Aviation Titan Boeing said they will lay off an additional 561 employees in Southern California. And we're also seeing that eBay might be laying off about 3,000 positions. And we can see right now more and more people are being laid off. It is rising, it is not falling, and as we go throughout the time period, where are these people going to get jobs? Because we have to remember, they continually tell us that the unemployment numbers are coming down. We're at 5.8% or so, and they're telling us that everything is fine, but all these jobs are part-time temp work. These are not good, solid, paying jobs. So when these people get laid off from these nice jobs, where are they going? Well, a lot of these people are not getting jobs, and a lot of them are taking part-time jobs. And we can see that those people who are not finding work, we see the continuous claims for unemployment is going up. This is the biggest rise in continuing jobless claims since November of 2008, and it's hitting right now during the holiday season when there's a lot of temp jobs, which is showing us that things are not going well. Now, we understand, and I talk about this quite a bit, real estate is falling apart here in the United States, and it is starting to have the effect across in Canada, Australia, in the European countries, and here in the United States, we see the mortgage applications and refinance applications. They are continually declining. They are not getting better. Things are not panning out like the government, the central bankers want. All of this was pumped up by easy free money by these central banks. They gave it to hedge funds, investment companies. They bought properties in cash, and they were told to hold on to these properties. And during this time period, while they were pumping this up, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, and many other mortgage companies were laying off thousands upon thousands of people. And this started back in August of 2013, and it is continually happening to this point. But what we're seeing right now is that U.S. mortgage applications to purchase new homes fell by 22% in November from October. And this is coming from the Mortgage Bankers Association. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the American people are tapped out. They have no money. They don't have the credit, the ability to purchase a new home. And this is why we're seeing a lot of these new homes, they're just being abandoned right now, and they're just being left and they're not being finished. We saw this happen in 2008 when the crash came. We're going to see the same thing happen right now. But don't worry, Obama is out there and he is letting us know that everything is absolutely fine. The Obama administration said on Thursday that the falling oil prices are helping the U.S. economy and are unlikely to lead to a reduction in production at the country's shale oil fields. Well, like I always say, every time a government official comes out and tells you something, it is always the opposite. Let's see. Obama told us that we can keep our doctors on Obamacare, which we couldn't. We can keep our plan, which we couldn't. That it's going to be affordable, which it isn't. There's going to be no boots on the ground in Iraq, which we see mission creep, and they're making the case to put boots on the ground. So far, everything that he's been telling us is absolutely the opposite. And he's saying that the lower oil prices are like a tax cut for the economy. So in terms of the macroeconomic impact, it's a net positive. And this is coming from the Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew. And we can see right now that this is really not having any type of an effect. But we have to understand they are trying everything they possibly can to boost the holiday season. They are bringing oil way down. They're trying to make everyone believe that we're in this recovery, that this is going to make it better for you. And right now, I see it all over the corporate media. They're telling us that retail sales are up. It's beat expectations. So let's think about this for a second. They are bringing oil way down to get 0.7% increase in retail sales in the holiday season. And this is including autos. So they're telling us in the last 8 months, all of a sudden retail sales have ticked up. Well, we would expect it to tick up. It's the holiday season. But are they getting what they wanted? No. It went up by 0.7%. And guess what? What created this retail rise? It was the automobile sales. Remember, they are pushing auto loans out there. You can walk into a dealership, zero down, zero deposit, zero this, zero that, and you walk out and you have an automobile, and they don't even check your credit. They don't care. Subprime borrower, no problem. Go in, get a loan. You have a car. And this is why car manufacturers have been channel stuffing. They're giving incentives to get those cars off the lot. And we're seeing a 1.7% month-on-month surge in vehicle purchases, which brought up the retail sales. You remove the vehicle purchases, what do you have? You have a terrible sales figure for this holiday season. And we have to remember, Black Friday and Cyber Monday were a complete flop. And as we go throughout this entire holiday season, we will know exactly how we did. Not by the numbers that the government throws at us and tells us that it was a great season. We will know by the number of stores that are closing. We saw this back in 2013. They told us it was an incredible holiday season. But when we hit February, when we hit March, we saw store closings. Not just a couple stores, hundreds, thousands of stores, Staples closing stores, Radio Shack, JCPenney, Target, Best Buy, Barnes & Noble. We saw many stores, retail outlets completely go out of business. This is how we will know if the holiday season is what they are saying. And I'm going to tell you right now, it will not be what they think it's going to be. It's already taken its effect on many different retailers. Delilah's, Aeropostale, who's closing stores during the holiday season. Delilah declaring bankruptcy. Radio Shack right now announced a last-ditch attempt to avoid bankruptcy. The plan involves closing hundreds of stores, cutting budgets, and laying off retail workers and employees in corporate headquarters. The chief executive, Joe Magnaca, said he did not specify the number of planned layoffs, but said 50% of the retailer's field managers will be cut. Radio Shack right now employs about 25,000 people. That's going to be a lot of people out of work once they start closing these stores, laying off managers. It is going to be a nightmare. And actually, we might not even see Radio Shack exist anymore, just like we won't see Sears, most likely, Kmart, JCPenney, and many, many other retailers. And we can see right now, they already know from the holiday season how it's going, and it is not going well. This is why they're already out there telling you that they're planning on cutting a lot or closing a lot of stores, because they realize there is absolutely no way with 2 weeks left that they're just going to all of a sudden receive all of these sales that are going to boost their earnings. It is not going to happen. Now, in this country, we realize that people are having a very rough time surviving. They're losing their jobs. They're taking on part-time jobs. They still have the expense of either their mortgage, their rent, their car payments, and a lot of people can't find jobs, and they have children. And we're seeing that the children living in poverty is at a record high. 65% of all children in the United States live in a home that receives aid from the federal government. We live at a time when child poverty in America is exploding. Here are some facts that show that the number of children in America living in poverty this Christmas is at an all-time record high. And these facts are coming from the Economic Collapse blog. The National Center for Children in Poverty says that 45% of all U.S. children belong to low-income families. According to a Census Bureau report that was released just this week, 65% of all children in America are living in a home that receives some form of aid from the federal government. When it comes to child poverty, the United States ranks 36 out of 41 wealthy nations that UNICEF looked at. That is absolutely awful. This year, almost 1 out of every 5 households in the United States will go through the holiday season on food stamps. One of the primary reasons why kids are suffering so much is because their parents are simply not making enough money. Since the Great Recession struck in 2007, the median wage for people between the ages of 25 and 34, adjusted for inflation, has fallen in every major industry except for healthcare. Overall, the quality of the jobs in America continues to decline. We know this for a fact. The jobs that we are adding are temp jobs. They're maybe retail, whatever is left of that. We see that waiters and waitresses, and most of them are not going to lead to anything except to give some type of income to the family, but not enough to sustain them. At this point, most Americans do not bring home enough income to support a middle-class lifestyle for their families. And we see this, and we understand that things are really going to be hard for those people around the country, and things are not getting better here. They are getting absolutely worse. Right now, Congress, the House, is voting on the $1.1 trillion Omnibus bill. Vote on a federal spending bill postponed. Still planned for this afternoon, and we'll have to see how this turns out. They might have to shut down the government, which was absolutely ridiculous. The House will vote on H.R. 83, the bill containing $1.1 trillion in appropriations to fund the government through 2015, also known as the Omnibus. Among the provisions in the bill is city-directed, watered-down Dodd-Frank by way of swap push-out provision, which would put taxpayers on the hook for derivative losses, as it would allow financial institutions to trade certain financial derivatives from subsidiaries that are insured by the FDIC, potentially putting taxpayers on the hook for losses caused by the risky contracts. And we know this. They understand that this whole entire derivative market is going to be coming tumbling down, and what they're trying to do right now is to protect themselves, to make sure that they are protected, not the people of the United States. Again, the central bankers, they're only looking out for themselves. They have no allegiance to the people or to the country. They are private organizations, and we need to continually remind ourselves of this. And we can see already the bankers put in this bill, a rider into this legislation, and we can see they're doing it for what they need it for. And of course, our Congress is going along with it with absolutely no problem. Now, some interesting news came out. It seems that China has a shot at getting the International Monetary Fund to endorse the yuan as a global reserve currency alongside the dollar. Now, we understand the private Western central bankers do not want this to happen. They're doing everything in their power to stop it. They're creating protests within China. They realize that in 2015 the BRICS system will go live. They're trying to provoke war all across the world to get something started, and we can see they're moving military assets all over the place at this time. In late 2015, the IMF will conduct its next twice-a-decade review of the basket of currencies its members can count toward their official reserves, including the yuan. In the so-called special drawing rights system would allow the IMF to recognize the ascent of the world's second biggest economy while aiding China's attempt to diminish the dollar's dominance in global trade and finance. China would need to satisfy the Washington-based lender's economic benchmarks and get the support of most of the other 187 member countries. The Asian nation is likely to pass both tests, said Eswar Prasad, who until 2006 worked at the IMF. Reserve currency status for the yuan would make central banks, particularly those in developing economies, more eager to hold yuan assets and diversify at the margin away from the dollar, as well as euros, yen, and Swiss francs. The U.S. could potentially veto the yuan inclusion in the SDR basket because the change would require the support of as much of 85% of voting shares on the IMF's executive board. The U.S. has 17% of the votes. The IMF said it's too soon to say whether the move would require 70% or 85% of the vote under the institution's bylaws. Now, we have to think back. The United States promised in 2010 that they were going to give up their votes to the IMF and let them go to the economies, the nations that are smaller economies, but they didn't do this. Now, is this the reason why they kept the 17% of the vote? Because they knew eventually the yuan will be slated to become the reserve currency of the world? Well, it's starting to look this way. And we realize that China has been making deals in the past couple years all around the world, bilateral trade agreements. They've been setting up clearinghouses with many of the countries. And we can see right now they are positioning themselves with gold, because they're purchasing lots of gold, to become the reserve currency. And we will find out in 2015 if this happens. And we have to remember, the private Western central bankers are going to do whatever they can to stop this from happening, because, again, as they become the reserve currency, countries will no longer need to hold on to the dollar. They can look at different currencies to hold on to put into their reserves. Africa is doing this. They're dropping the dollar, ramping up with the yuan and renminbi. And we can see right now this would pose a huge problem, especially if the United States government central bankers lost control of the Middle East and these countries took back their central bank, started selling the oil, not using the dollar. Other countries who are holding, let's say, the yuan, could use that to purchase the oil, and the dollar would devalue because the dollar would float back to the United States, and we would have a complete crash. And you can see right now why the central bank, the United States government, is trying to provoke Russia and get into war with all those players: North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, Syria. And we can see that they're going to continually try to do this. They are not going to stop. This is why the Treasury now is purchasing survival kits for the bankers, because they know what's coming. The government is getting prepared, and every single person needs to get prepared. You don't want to wait for the last minute, because it will be too late at that time. And what's the worst case scenario? Everything that I've been saying and everything that's been reported is completely the opposite. So what? You have food, you have supplies, you have gold, you have silver, you have cash on hand. What did you lose? You lost absolutely nothing. But I'm going to tell you right now, from every single indicator and everything that we've been looking at, we are heading down that path. It is going to happen. The question is when. Now, as everyone realizes, I am not for Obamacare. I was very angry when Obamacare came out and Congress decided to exempt themselves, but they said it was good enough for the people, but hey, we don't want this thing because we know it is absolutely terrible. Well, it looks like the Senate Republican staffers might be required to obtain health insurance through the Obamacare exchanges under a rule passed Wednesday by the GOP conference. Senate Republicans will designate their staff as official, moving them automatically onto the marketplaces. A loophole used in both chambers allows lawmakers to designate staff as unofficial or official staff, which permits them to keep their insurance coverage under the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program. David Vitter said in a statement, and he's a Republican in Congress, Washington should have to live under Obamacare. I completely agree with him. If you're telling us that this is good for the people, then the Senate, the Republicans, the Democrats, the entire government, and the president should be under Obamacare. The question is, at this point, why aren't they? They should feel what the people are feeling. And once they feel it and they realize, well, I can't go to this doctor, this plan is no good, what do you mean I have to pay out of my pocket? Then they'll start to realize this isn't that great. And the Republicans right now are jumping all on the Obamacare. The Democrats have not done it yet. And we can see right now the president hasn't really done this yet either. Yes, he did it for show, but he really didn't take the plan. And let me just say, when Obamacare came out, every single person in government should have been sitting in front of that computer. It should have been televised all over the place to say, listen, I am taking this health insurance because I believe in it. But guess what? They didn't believe in it. That's why they exempted themselves. That's why they didn't read it. That's why nobody wanted it. That's why they're keeping their own health benefits, because they realize what they've given the people is absolutely junk, and it is penalties and taxes. That's all it is. Now, there's 24 states now on board to sue Obama over the immigration. 24 states have signed on to the legal challenge against President Barack Obama over his executive action on immigration. The Texas-led coalition of states in the legal challenge consists of Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, North Carolina, South Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. These are the states that are making the move, and it seems like more and more states are getting on board, and they are pushing this forward because they're saying this is completely against the Constitution, and I completely agree with them. Now, there's a new Pew poll out there. Pew Research released a poll showing Americans are more concerned with protecting gun rights than with passing more gun control. Now, this is the opposite of what the Obama administration is trying to tell us, that more people want gun control out there. And again, we're not seeing this happen because we're seeing a rise in gun purchases. Basically, what we're seeing here is people are getting very nervous about what's going on in the government. They realize the government is going too far. The government is pretty much creating a police state and trying to remove the rights of the people, and people are getting nervous. And this is why 52% of respondents said it is more important to protect the rights of Americans to own guns than to pass more gun control laws. And we understand the government has been trying to use false flag events like Sandy Hook and many other shootings to convince us that these guns are unsafe and then we have to take them away, that we have to limit the number of bullets in magazines. And we can see right now that all of this is not true. It was made up by the government. They make up their own statistics, and we can see most of the people out there are supporting the gun rights. And again, nothing can override the rights of the people. Yes, they create laws to try to limit it, but again, in the Second Amendment, it says shall not be infringed upon. The same thing with all the other rights. They try to limit the free speech. They try to limit how many rights we have with search and seizures without warrants. They're trying to do this because they're trying to convince everyone that these are not rights, they are privileges, and the government can take them away at any time. And they're trying to teach our young, the next generation, that no, you don't have rights. The government gives you these rights. These are privileges to you, and the government can take them away at any time. But this is completely untrue. Now, with regards to rights of the people, we understand that not just the United States, but many countries are trying to remove the rights of the people. They're trying to control them by using certain laws that the government puts on them, like the UK has been putting and censoring certain things on the internet, and they want to be the filter, and they will decide what the people will see. Canada right now, a divided Supreme Court of Canada has ruled that police can conduct a limited search of suspects' cell phones without getting search warrants, but they must follow strict rules. And what are these strict rules? Well, 3 dissenting justices said the police must get a search warrant in all cases except in rare instances where there is a danger to the public or the police, or if evidence could be destroyed. Well, how do you prove any of that? And all of a sudden, all they need to do, I should say, is say, yeah, looks like they were going to destroy that evidence, and this is why I had to search their phone. They're a danger to the public, and I have to search their phone. So what will stop the police in searching everyone's phone? Absolutely nothing. And this is just the first stage, and then eventually they'll make it even easier for the police to search, and this is how it starts out. They do a little bit at a time to get the people used to it, and they continually going over and over. Now, we understand that the United States and many other countries, they are becoming police states because they realize the collapse is coming. They realize the system is completely falling apart, and they know that people are going to riot. They're going to be very upset. People are going to struggle to find food, water, supplies, just to survive. And they realize that this is coming very, very soon. And we know that there's other things that are going to happen, like false flag events, and this is why we can see the Treasury Department telling their bank representatives to go out and purchase survival kits, because they realize that eventually all of this is going to completely fall apart, and there might not be lights, there might not be food, there might not be water, and you have to be prepared for this. But we can see that we have relinquished control of our government to those who care nothing for our rights, our dignity, our humanity. And now we're saddled with an authoritarian regime that is deaf to our cries, dumb to our troubles, blind to our needs, and accountable to no one. And it is completely out of control. It is really time to change the rules of the game. Actually, it's time to change the game altogether, and there will be a time when we have to all come together and stand up and say enough is enough. Right now, people are living in the illusion. It'll be very, very tough to do this. But when we hit that false flag event and things start to fall apart and the collapse starts to occur, this will be our chance for a peaceful time to say enough with this government. We had enough. Now, will the government react peacefully to us? Most likely not, and this is why most of the people are keeping their weapons to protect themselves, not to go out and get the government. We want to do this in a peaceful way, but as history shows, governments never react in a peaceful way because they never want to give up their power whatsoever. Now, we understand out in Ferguson and in New York that things happened where, of course, they're trying to push the race card, and this is not a race issue whatsoever. This is a government militarization police issue, and they're trying to use this for certain agendas. First, they were trying to push this and get the riots going across the country so they can declare martial law. It seems like they just couldn't get this off the ground. They tried multiple times. It just didn't work. And right now what we're seeing, and this is part of their agenda, and I didn't understand it at first, but now it's becoming clearer. The government wants to pretty much control and nationalize the police force. Those who favor increased power for the government at the federal level, at the expense of state and local government, use accusations of police brutality to argue for transferring law enforcement responsibilities to government officials in Washington. The government wants to remove local control of the police and place all police power in the hands of the federal government. Think about what they are doing. DHS pretty much is making all local law enforcement come into compliance with DHS. They're giving them tanks, surveillance equipment, machine guns, fatigues, and other equipment. The United States is one of the last countries, if not the last, to have widespread local police power instead of the types of national systems that exist elsewhere. The proposition that turning all law enforcement over to national government would eliminate or even drastically reduce police behavior is not borne out by either history or logic. No one can seriously disagree with the fact that in nations with nationalized police forces, the liberties of the people are severely curtailed. We can see that there's dictatorship, such as Stalin's Russia. Hitler's Germany also proves that point. On June 17, 1936, Hitler unified all police forces under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler. The Gestapo operated without judicial review and had the power to place individuals in protective custody. Under such custody, the person being held actually signed a request to be jailed, supposedly to be protected from bodily harm. Of course, failure to sign the request form no doubt led to such harm from the nationalized police force. Two federal campaigns that have worked to increase national control over local police, the war on drugs and the war on terror. Should someone object to abuses by federal agents in either of these two areas, the objector is swiftly condemned as being for drugs or for terror, and we see this happening right now. The drive to nationalize the local police continues. Sometimes the method is through bullying, such as proclamations from the Attorney General or statements from the President himself. And when President Obama declared that some local police acted stupidly, other methods are more subtle. The federal government uses funding, training, outfitting of local police departments, and even handing over military equipment to local police departments, blurring the lines between law enforcement and the military. And we can see this is exactly what happened during Ferguson and New York City. We saw that the government came out and Obama came out and said, listen, we are going to put cameras on all the officers, we're going to do training, and the federal government is going to fund this. And now all the local law enforcement, who do they report to? The federal government. So they're trying to nationalize the entire police force to be under the control of the federal government. And now the agenda is becoming very, very clear of why these things are happening here at this time. Now we understand Obama, Eric Holder, they were all out there and they appeared on talk shows telling us that they were going to rein in the spying on Americans. And we realized, and I reported on this yesterday, that it's not happening. They keep extending it 90 days, and they're not stopping it whatsoever. And we understand why they're not stopping it. They're creating social profiles on every single person. But there is a warning coming out from Justin Amash, and he is a representative in Congress. And he's saying that Congress snuck a provision into the Intelligence Authorization Act, which will ramp up spying on everyday, normal, average Americans. The Intelligence Authorization Act for 2015 grants the executive branch virtually unlimited access to the communications of every single American. Last night, the Senate passed an amended version of the Intelligence Reauthorization Bill with a new Section 309. One of the House never has considered. Section 309 authorizes the acquisition, retention, and dissemination of non-public communications, including those to and from U.S. persons. The section contemplates that those private communications of Americans obtained without a court order may be transferred to domestic law enforcement for criminal investigation. To be clear, Section 309 provides the first statutory authority for the acquisition, retention, and dissemination of U.S. persons' private communications obtained without legal process such as a court order or a subpoena. What are they doing? They're setting up the complete police state where they're going to say, yes, it is legal now to spy on every single person. And this completely violates the Fourth Amendment. And they don't care anymore. They're at the end game. They don't care if they violate the rights of the people. And we can see this is what they've been doing. Right now, this is trying to be stopped. And I believe it might have been passed in the House. And this definitely needs to be stopped. This is complete violation of our rights. And I don't know and I don't understand why every single American isn't out there screaming on the top of their lungs. Actually, why isn't Congress looking at this and saying, wait a minute, this violates the Fourth Amendment. We can't do this. And I think with our new government, we need to add things onto the Constitution. Like every single government official needs to take a test. And the test is going to be on the rights of the people. It's going to be on all the amendments of the Constitution and the Constitution itself. And they need to sign off on each one of these. And if they break any of one of these, they are removed from their position immediately, because they understand the rights of the people and they cannot be infringed upon. And it seems like right now, every single government official that is in office right now, I would say about 99% of them, they need to be removed at this time. They have broken the contract with we the people. They are no longer working for us, and we can see this from everything that they are doing. Now we understand that the CIA torture report came out, and we're thinking like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, they're going to get those people that handled the torture, and that would be a lot of the government officials. But right now, the White House spokesperson, John Ernst, announced that the U.S. president shares the U.S. Department of Justice decision that no prosecutable crime has been committed by the CIA officers or anyone else. U.S. President Obama agrees with the U.S. Department of Justice, finding that the CIA officers involved in enhanced interrogation, which is torture, should not be prosecuted. Well, we have to remember the War Crimes Act of 1996, a federal statute set forth at 18 U.S.C. Section 22441, makes it a federal crime for any U.S. national, whether military or civilian, to violate the Geneva Convention by engaging in murder, torture, or inhuman treatment. The statute applies not only to those who carry out the acts, but also those who order it, know about it, or fail to take steps to stop it. The statute applies to everyone, no matter how high and mighty. The 18 U.S.C. Section 2441 has no statute of limitations, which means that a war crime complaint can be filed at any time. So right now, they're saying, listen, we're above the law. We don't have to be accountable for this. We know we tortured. We knew it was going on, and we don't care anymore. And this whole torture report is absolutely a waste of time, and all it was done was it was released at this specific time to make it look like there's going to be more attacks coming from all these different countries, all these countries that the United States needs to get back into or wants to get into, because they need to put boots on the ground to get this war started. Now, out in Hong Kong, it looks like the Hong Kong police arrested pro-democracy activists and cleared most of the main protest site Thursday, making an end to more than 2 months of street demonstrations in the Chinese-controlled city. And it seems like it's all broken up and people are on their way leaving the area. And of course, the protesters are saying they're going to be back. And again, we understand that the United States has been pushing this and they're trying to overthrow the government of China, but it doesn't seem like it's working. Now, we understand there's still a ceasefire going on in Ukraine. Heavy weapons have been pulled back at this time. Ukraine's military and the militia of the self-proclaimed Donetsk area have withdrawn their heavy weaponry from the front lines. But what's very interesting is that Ukraine, Poroshenko in particular, who said this, is out there, and he is in a 3-day visit to Australia, and he is urging Russia to withdraw from the region, where both sides have been engaged in a 1-day truce that Poroshenko proposed in a bid to revive the September ceasefire deal. He said, please stop the fire. Please release the hostages. Please withdraw your troops from my territory. Please close the border, Poroshenko said during a press conference in Melbourne. And I promise, if you close the border within 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, we will have peace and stability in Ukraine. Now, Moscow is out there, and they're saying they're surprised by this remarks because they're working with the Ukrainian government for this ceasefire with They're trying to get the southeastern people involved because they're really the ones that need to be involved. And they're saying there is nothing on the table about closing the borders whatsoever. Right now, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe have been deployed to the borders, and they are monitoring them right now, and they see no violations whatsoever. So this whole thing about closing the borders is coming from out of left field right now, and they don't understand where this new demand came from. Now, the European Union is demanding that Russia bail out the EU and Ukraine for what has happened in that country. And I'm going to tell you right now, Russia is not going to bail them out whatsoever. And who knows, more sanctions might be applied to Russia at this time. Now, the new U.S. Navy has deployed a new laser weapon in the Persian Gulf. The Office of Naval Research reported that the U.S. Navy successfully deployed and operated for the first time laser weapon systems aboard a Navy vessel during demonstrations in the Persian Gulf. I do have this video on the X22Report.com site. You just go to Sentinel Alerts and you can see the video of the laser hitting targets and blowing them up. Now, the Pentagon is out there, and they are considering the redeployment of nuclear cruise missiles in Europe. We don't have ground launch missile in Europe now, obviously, because they are prohibited by the treaty, McKean said, but what would obviously be one option to explore is to how we can get these missiles into this region somehow, some way, and it looks like they are preparing for a nuclear war, and here we go. We understand that it is coming. They're preparing. All military assets are being maneuvered into certain areas because they are definitely getting ready to push this forward. Now, it looks like the European Union has barred all Libyan airlines from operating in the European airspace due to concerns over passenger safety amid fierce clashes in the North African country. Recent events in Libya have led to a situation whereby the Civil Aviation Authority is no longer able to fulfill its intentional obligation with regard to the safety of the Libyan aviation sector. So basically, the flights are basically banned in European airspace. And we also see in Libya at this time the government, which is not really operating right now. There's two governments going on. There is the puppet government from the United States, which really has no control over Libya at this time. And then there's their new government that the people brought into power, but the Libya's internationally recognized government, which is the power government from the United States, plans to launch an alternative payment system in attempt to control the country's oil revenues. They are getting nervous because what's happening right now, they're getting ready to sell the oil, not using the dollar. In order to control the oil revenues and change the payment system, we need to set up a new system in coordination with the banks. The measure aims at circumventing the militants in the capital city of Tripoli, as it will nullify their accounts. So they're getting very nervous. The central bankers are getting nervous, and it seems like they're instructing the puppet government to start changing things so the people's government do not have access to the bank systems. And we can see right now they are definitely getting ready to sell this oil, not using the US dollar. They will take any other currency. Now, the Syrian rebels, they're out there and they are complaining, and the United States stopped their payments. The rebels are not receiving payments right now. A top civilian coordinator for rebel forces estimated that the cutoff affects about 8,000 of the estimated 10,000 fighters. Individual fighters were receiving a paycheck of $150 from the United States. In November, we received all kinds of support, including salaries. This month, support has stopped completely, so they are not getting paid. And I'm wondering if they're doing away with that rebel army inside Syria, letting the Islamic State be the proxy army, and all funds are being shifted. They're training a whole new force come March, and they might most likely just let this one die off right now. Assad said that he is with Russia, that if they would like to broker peace talks, he is with them. He is all for it. Now, NBC News is out there, and it's coming from the U.S. government, corporate media, and they're saying that President Assad has been accused of encouraging the rise of the Islamic State, that they're really not attacking each other, they're kind of working with each other. And this is coming from the rebels inside Syria, saying they've been monitoring this, and they're seeing that Syria is actually working with the Islamic State. Henman said the figures suggest ISIS and Assad security forces have embraced the clever strategy of mostly ignoring each other. Some rebels suspect coordination between the Syrian regime and the Islamic State. So right now, they're trying to show that Assad is working with the Islamic State because, again, the entire goal is to go into that country and remove Assad. And how are you going to get into that country? You have to show some type of way that Assad is working with the Islamic State. But we know this is not true. We know the Islamic State is a proxy army for the United States, UK, Israel, and other Arab nations. Now, 80% of Americans right now, this is a Fox News poll, they are expecting some type of an attack here in the United States by the Islamic State. The one thing they really don't realize is that it's going to be an inside job. They really do believe that there is a terrorist organization out there and they're going to be attacking the United States. And we can see right now the central bankers, the U.S. government, they are definitely getting prepared for some type of false flag event and the collapse. Now, it seems like the Islamic State is pushing out a pamphlet that says that the Islamic State militant group can capture, punish, and rape female non-believers. It even outlines how to use them as their sex slaves and also justifies child rape. And if you notice, all the information that's coming out about the Islamic State is everything the Western world would, or any person in the world would hate. Beheadings, rape, child abuse, child rape, anything that they can think of. And this is the tactic of the United States, Israel, UK, to get every single person to hate the Islamic State and to stop it. And if you notice, they always bring in the child angle because it goes right to the people's hearts, and they say we have to go in there and stop it. So they're building their case to bring troops into Iraq and then eventually get into Assad and try to remove him. And you can see every single time they come out with this propaganda, they're pushing the agenda as hard as they possibly can. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.